Something's not quite right here today, is it? We're going to talk about chords and the effect that we can have on them as bass players. Now, you can play chords on the bass, but a lot of the time we're going to be playing along to people playing other instruments, such as the guitar. So I wanted to start out today with, actually start with a guitar. Get a chord and see what the effect we can have upon it. Now, what we've been doing so far in the bass lines that we've been writing and covering and coming up with is either playing a root note or playing notes but leading towards that root note. But what we can do as bass players is also affect the chord that the band is playing as a whole by playing non-root notes. And the easiest way to explain this is to have a chord and show you the effect that playing other notes underneath it have on that chord. So through the magic of looping, which hopefully is going to work for me today, we're going to take a nice C major chord here, loop that round, and then with a fancy jump cut we'll get the bass out and I'll show you what we can do. That'll do nicely. There we are. Much better. Now, I love playing guitar, and it's a great instrument to learn that supports your knowledge of the bass. But bass has always been my first love and my first instrument to play. So this is much better back at home. So what I've done here is I've looped around that chord. We got a nice C major chord to play under. Now, if I get that going, I'm just going to turn that down a little bit. We have that running underneath what we're playing here. And that's just going to keep going. So our go-to sort of position when we're playing bass players is to play the root note of the chord. And that's fine and it's easy, but we can do other things underneath it. So the C is obviously going to support the C major chord, but if we go back to some of the other lessons that I've covered, there are other notes that we can play under that will affect the sound of that chord. The most dramatic of that one is to play underneath the chord, any given major chord, the root note of the relative minor. Now, if you go back to my modes series, the relative minor of C is A minor. Now, if I play an A under a C chord, effectively, realistically, what's happening there is it's a C chord over an A root. But if you work through the mode series, the notes of an A minor are all the same as a C major. And the effect that we're having by playing an A underneath a C is to effectively change what the band are playing as a whole from a major chord into a minor chord. And I'll play that now for you. So here's our major. But if I play an A, the tonality of the chord as a whole, the chord is still the same, but the tonality of what the band are playing has suddenly become minor. That's sort of the most extreme change you can make to it, which is great. We can have great control here while not being even in the limelight necessarily. Now, sort of the opposite of that is to move up and play maybe the third of the chord, in which case in C this would be the E note, or we can play an octave lower. And that being the major third of the note is a major part of a C major chord, or any major chord, and we can really emphasize the major feel of that chord. So here's the C again, and then move up to the E. So it's really sort of emphasizing the major tonality of that chord. Now, of course, we can play whatever we want to underneath it, really. Some of it's going to sound better, some of it's not going to sound as good. The next sort of note to play is the fifth of the chord, which is the G. Now, that's a less defining note. It's not major or minor by definition, but if we play it underneath it, it just gives a different tonality to what we're producing as a whole. So here's the C again, and here's the G. It's kind of a unresolved kind of feel to it, which just gives a little bit of tension to the chord. Now, another interesting one is to play the seventh note, which in this case is B, and this works quite well in conjunction with playing the relative minor, but sort of as a walking down note. But in itself, it can add a nice little sort of tension and weirdness to the chord. So again, we'll start with the C, and then the B. Very tense, very tense. But then we can go down to that A, and it's quite nice, and it becomes a minor chord. And then we can go down to the G, and of course, you know, we can carry that on, play the F, E, and the second again is a very tense note, but then leads to back to that C again. So you can see that playing different scale notes underneath any given chord will dramatically change what that sounds like as a whole. And what I was doing there was just running down through the scale notes, but changing the chord in each time and what the overall chord that the band are playing is. So just give some demonstrations here. I'll play a few different random notes and move around within the chord, the scale structure, and you can hear how it affects the chord. And remember, this is just a looped C major chord, standard open shape on a guitar. So there you go. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of giving the guitarist a bit of an easy ride there, I guess, because all they have to do is hold one chord, and we can change the whole chord pattern with our root notes. But it can be another useful thing to do underneath a simple pattern to just make the tonality of the band sound interesting. Just to add flavour, just add colours to the chords, and you know, to make for a more interesting bass line. So hopefully food for thought. You know, root notes are great, but you don't have to play them all the time.